Hello again, my name is Neil Oliver and this is GB News Originals. These are dangerous days for all of us. Temperatures have been stoked so high in Britain and Europe that revolutionary fire might break out in any one of numerous places. The kindling has been carefully piled around the people. Fire, as we know, is a good servant but a bad master, and once it takes hold, fire does what it does. Across the West, populations have been divided among themselves by cynical globalist policies designed to undermine and undo nation states, uncontrolled mass immigration being not the least of it. The anger has built up like a charge in a building storm cloud, or dry kindling in a forest ready to be ignited by whoever stands to gain from a world reduced to ashes. Ordinary people may get burned, they always do, but so too might any of their so-called leaders. History has examples of leaders of both notionally left and notionally right-wing ideologies being consumed. Mussolini of Italy was brutally killed alongside his lover, and their bodies hung by the heels from the frontage of a filling station. More recently, Ceausescu of Romania was shot by a firing squad of his own forces alongside his wife. A fascist and a communist. But isms make no difference and offer no shield when the temperature is high enough. And someone, somewhere, has decided it's time for a change. Not change of direction, just a change of faces. Mussolini and Ceausescu led cults of personality, making themselves the focus of ideology. But in the West, by contrast, we have leaders of the cult of no personality, for whom life has no apparent meaning beyond the last soundbite. A lifetime ago, so-called leaders at least seemed to stand for something, seemed to believe in something. For whatever reason, that's no longer the case. And so we have sock puppets, little men and little women, little in terms of character and credibility, and broadly loathed at home. Now we have the likes of Starmer of Britain, Macron of France, Merz of Germany, von der Leyen of the EU Commission, who demonstrably believe in nothing, or at least in no more than endless war and by its prosecution, saving their own skins. Here in Britain, we have two-dimensional figures that live high on the hog while overseeing and enforcing the impoverishment of hard-working people. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner buys a luxury pad in Brighton, her third property, for the better part of £1 million, while overseeing policies that crucify owners of second homes. We've just had the spectacle of what former politician and podcaster George Galloway called the Seven Dwarves in Washington. Zelensky of Ukraine, Starmer, Macron, Merz, Maloney, von der Leyen, the usual suspects, all in town. As far as I'm concerned, to beg President Trump to keep the Ukraine war going at all costs, the horrific human cost included. By now, the figure I hear for the death toll is 1.7 million. But I say that the Euro weenies need the war as their only lifeline.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living. And maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance. And that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
For Zelensky and for Starmer, Macron, Merz and the rest, the worst may have already begun to happen. Trump and Russia's Putin may have agreed an end to the charnel house. To get down to brass tacks, and the brass that's made wherever there's muck, Trump and Putin are rumoured to have agreed, among other things, that Russia's frozen assets of $350 billion may be invested in the US. The reality of the truth of the relationship between the US and Britain, between the US and Western Europe, must be faced. Since the end of World War II, Brits have been encouraged to think of a special relationship with the US. Europe's enthusiasm for NATO has, since at least the fall of the wall, been all about their dad being bigger than anyone else's and, more importantly, with deeper pockets. Britain and Europe have been happy to hold the big guy's coat while he has gone about telling everyone in the world how it's going to be. That time has passed. There are new sheriffs in town. The parts of the world where most people live have emerged as having little need of the West, especially a West that keeps bombing left, right and centre and forcing regime change, weaponising its currency along the way. Now there's the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa and many more besides, certainly Iran. Back in the West, the time for the holding of the big guy's coat is likely over. It's hardly about Trump, hardly his fault. The relationship was a one-way street long ago, certainly by the time of Obama and Biden and probably long before. Turns out, to put it in relationship terms, the US just wasn't that into us. Rumour has it that when it came to talks in Washington about the future, Trump sent Ursula von der Leyen out of the room. All of them revealed their own irrelevance anyway, their own craven, immoral, empty natures. Germany's Merz was still banging on about a ceasefire in Ukraine that everyone, even Merz, knows will never happen. Von der Leyen talked about the necessity to fight on in Ukraine for the sake of abducted children. This is the desperate grab for the moral high ground as the only policy when you have nothing meaningful whatever to say about what matters, like the security architecture for the future of the continent, about how to have vibrant economies that aren't propped up only by perpetual war. Minus the Nord Stream pipeline, Germany, once the industrial powerhouse of Europe, is on her knees. France has run out of colonies to suck from. Britain has Ed Miliband building windmills, while the Prime Minister, backed by men in uniform, talk about fighting Russia. It's the same move that was played when the US pulled out of Afghanistan and the cry from the West was about the plight of women and girls who would be denied access to education. This after 20 years of NATO occupation, during which perhaps half the population of the children suffered malnutrition and stunted futures as a result. The elephant in the room for the Euro-weenies, of course, is the frozen Russian assets, the $350 billion worth of Russian funds held hostage in Brussels, London, France. If the rumours of the deal between Trump and Putin are to be believed, then those European countries sitting on those billions will be ordered by the US to hand them back. And this may or may not be difficult and or uncomfortable for those holding the funds. As long as the war kept going, and perhaps if Russia had been defeated, well, there was a payday to look forward to. War's good business if you're winning, not so much when you lose. Call what happened in Ukraine anything you want, but the US and NATO lost. But if peace breaks out and that money comes due, then what? As I say, in my opinion, these are dangerous days for those who have been in the spotlight. Commenting on so much that may be revealed in days ahead is sage and experienced former high-ranking soldier and former White House advisor Colonel Douglas Macgregor, talking about Zelensky.
What happens when all of the mass graves are opened in Ukrainian territory that were filled with dead Ukrainian soldiers that were never returned to their families? What happens when mass graves full of non-military people, Russians that were killed, Russian civilians that were lined up and murdered? Go back to the first atrocity of significance, which was Bucha, back at the beginning of the war, and the attempts to blame the Russians for it when it was never Russian, it was always Ukrainian. What I'm saying is that this man is presiding over more than just the average organized crime state. This man is in charge of a criminal enterprise that has murdered countless numbers of people. He has also participated directly or indirectly with his government in the child trafficking, the trafficking of women, the use of drugs, the reselling of equipment to the drug cartels in Latin America, the reselling of equipment to terrorists in various parts of North Africa, the Middle East, and Africa, Central Africa. In other words, this man is very dirty in every sense of the word. He's not just standing in the shade, as we used to say. This man is dirty in the worst possible way, sitting on who knows how many hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars that have been pilfered and stolen from the American people and Europe, but primarily us, in banks all over the world. This is someone who should be tried in an international court of law. And sadly, we're complicit, but we can exonerate ourselves if we end it and get out of it. But he's very much complicit in all this criminal activity. So I think that's in the back of his mind. Is he going to survive in his little villa and vineyards in Italy? Is he going to survive in his private home in southern Florida on the Gulf? Is he going to survive in his other private home in Israel or something else? I don't think so. I think he's going to be chased for as long as he is alive. And ultimately, somebody will get him, and it may well be his own people, especially as they discover just how corrupt he and his friends are.
Hard to listen to for those still listening to the litany about the fight in Ukraine being about the fight for democracy, far less missing children. Countries of Western Europe, Britain included, staked everything on the US defeating Russia. That didn't happen, and now the jig is up. Chickens will come home to roost. I see and hear talk of a second front in the Balkans, a way to keep the war going. By their own estimate, the countries of Europe invested in Ukraine will not be in a position to help in real terms until perhaps as late as 2029. Until then, their hope must be sustained war, it being easier to keep an old war going than pause and start a new one later. So, a second front, anyone? Serbs are being set against Croats. Croats are being set against Bosnian Muslims. Bosnian Muslims are being set against Croats. All it takes is an atrocity, a spark. In all of these countries, Britain has NGOs. Just saying. Of course, with an eye to history, the Balkans have been used before. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, the capital of the then Austro-Hungarian province of Bosnia-Herzegovina, against a complicated web of mutual alliances involving the great powers, sparked World War I. It hardly takes a great leap of imagination to contemplate that what worked before to get a world war going could work again. It's no conspiracy theory to hold the opinion that the unpopular at-home leaders of the countries of Western Europe have everything to lose if the war ends and Russia and the US find a way to move forward. If you play with matches while standing in a barrel of petrol, well, let's just say someone doing so might get more than their fingers burned. Our leaders disgrace themselves and in so doing humiliate their peoples. There comes a day when those peoples have had enough. And at the end of the day, no one, no regime, regardless of totalitarian fantasies, dismissive and contemptuous of its people, no one is fireproof. Thanks for watching GB News Originals. I'm Neil Oliver. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe.